Steve, Kevin, let's start here with a look, kind of a global look at the NFC North, which has been run by the Green Bay Packers the last few years since Matt LaFleur has come on as the head coach there. Aaron Rodgers back for another season, but it'll be without Davante Adams. Steve, starting with you here, is there anybody who can step up to the plate here in the NFC North and knock off the Green Bay Packers, considering the moves that we've seen now, the comings and the goings in this division?
Yeah, I think the Minnesota Vikings can. I mean, this is where, look at all the close games that the Vikings lost, over the past couple years, all these 3-point games and last possession games. So they were close, right? So now they come in with Kevin O'Connell. They figure they can open up this offense a little bit. They're going to go a lot more 11 personnel. Dalvin Cook is going to be, if he stays healthy, we know they're a different team with Dalvin Cook. So I think, again, the versatility of Dalvin Cook doing the 3x1 stuff and the 2x1 stuff offensively, if they can put points on the board and, you look defensively, they added Zadarius Smith. If him and Danielle Hunter can be healthy, they're going to cause problems. So I think Minnesota is the one team in the division that right now is ripe to give the Packers a challenge.
I think there's no question about that, especially considering the state of the other two teams in the division. So if you're going to pick one, you're definitely picking the Vikings. But I do like what they did in upgrading a defense that just couldn't get stops down the end. We saw that when they almost lost to the Lions, and they did lose to the Lions, couldn't get stops at the end. I think adding Zadarius Smith is underrated, not only because of what he brings off the edge, but his versatility along the line. Like, you can line him up next to Danielle Hunter and please try to block that. Go ahead, offense.
Right.
And Jordan Hicks can clean up in the middle. They do have questions on the back end. Pat Pete coming back, I think, is a solid start. I think we need to see what they do in the draft to add to that secondary. But I think the offense, there's little question about it. I think the offensive line is going to get better. And like we said, they have a ton of weapons. Justin Jefferson, and Adam Thielen are two of the top receivers, going to be the most dynamic receiver duo in the league this year, I think, in my opinion. And I think they can overcome any shortcomings that you have with Kirk Cousins and the questions. We've seen other guys go deep into the playoffs with maybe not the star quarterback. I think Kirk Cousins is that second-tier sort of guy that can get there.
And guys, to me, it feels like, and you'd love to get your thought here, that Aaron Rodgers coming back was certainly, the biggest piece of the offseason for the Green Bay Packers. But the shock that followed with Davante Adams on the exit, and until I see the succession plan, if you will, or the replacement plan at wide receiver, like to me, it feels like, whoa, why did we do one without the other here? And maybe there is a plan there to figure out a way to get better at wide receiver in the draft, and we'll get to that in a second. But to me, it feels like without, Davante Adams, I mean, is the championship window closing a lot faster here on Rodgers' run, Steve, with the Packers?
It's interesting because some people look at, Matt LaFleur's offense, which is Sean McVay's offense, Kyle Shanahan's offense, Mike Shanahan's offense, say they can win without that standout receiver. Okay, and we know they've got two really good running backs, but that is not the identity of Aaron Rodgers. He's not going to turn it off or turn around and hand the ball off 35 times a game or throw 35 swing passes. He's someone who's got to be able to scramble, create, kind of have that adjunct option when he's throwing the ball. And I don't see it. Davante Adams would draw double coverages. Now teams can defend this team completely differently, and to the point where teams can stack the box and say, Aaron Rodgers beat us.
Yeah.
So unless they've got some other plan, which is why, I thought they'd be on a Devontae Parker, who just got traded to the Patriots. Maybe they were, and they just lost out.
They were.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think they're still going to be in the wide receiver market to see what happens. Maybe the Julio Jones, who knows, but
Julio.
I think, drafting a receiver, Aaron Rodgers has a trust issue, right?
Yeah.
So a guy coming out of the gate, that's another part of the problem. So they're still going to be a good football team. They're a good defensive football team, right? They take the ball away. They do some things to get the ball back to Rodgers. But in terms of competing with some of the other big boys, I do think that window is closing.
An interesting thing with the Davante Adams deal was that had a cascading effect on the Packers. I think they were going to get Valdez-Scantling back, and that was their plan. But then Tyreek Hill wants a raise, so they get traded.
Yeah, look at the chain
comes
reaction.
over the top, And that's a chain. I think they thought, okay, well, we'll get MVS back, and that's something. And then he got scooped up by the Chiefs after the dominoes happened. So I think that was part of their plan that just didn't work out. And I think another thing with the receivers is we kind of overlook Amari Rodgers. It was a 3rd-round pick. The Packers have this draft, and we're going to draft and develop, right? Draft and develop. Well, they drafted him. Now let's see if they can develop him as they have other guys in the past. I think he's a wild card in this whole scenario if the coaching staff believes that they can develop.
Okay, guys, I'm going to kind of split this up here. And since we got 2 of you on here, I'm going to, Kevin, I'm going to give you the Packers and the Bears. And Steve, I'm going to give you the Vikings and the Lions. Okay. And I want first to start with just a grade on the off seasons based on additions and subtractions. And then we'll get into draft priority using the same team assignments there. So, Kevin, let me start with you since we've been kind of gearing this first part of the conversation on the Packers. How would you ultimately evaluate what we've seen offseason moves thus far?
I mean, I had them as a A- roster at the end of last year, and I would say they've dropped to at least a B, maybe a B-. I think Davante Adams is a huge part of that. I think he's a whole letter grade almost. Like, that's the type of – he's the best wide receiver in the league, in my opinion. The number 1 wide receiver, and you lost him and you didn't replace him. So I think that's where you start. But I think one underrated thing that I would give the Packers a boost for, I think – Rich Bisaccia coming in as your special teams coordinator answers a huge question. And I know that's not necessarily a roster part, but they were the worst special teams team in the league last year. He immediately boosts that. So I think that's an underrated part of their offseason, that they got a coach who we all believe in and trust, that he can make one of the 3 key elements of football into, if not average, at least average, right, maybe better.
And I think we got to give them some credit too for the re-signings, right? Preston Smith coming back over, on an extension. Devondre Campbell. I think Jair Alexander was coming down the pike here at some point. Devondre Campbell, one of the best, kind of under the radar acquisitions of the entire season last year. It was such a key player for the Packers, and now getting, his chance to cash in there in Green Bay. All right, Steve, let's move to the Vikings. Let's get an offseason grade there.
Yeah, look, let's go B, right? Okay, so you changed leadership. First off, I'm starting there, right? Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi, the new GM. We don't know about them, right? But the one thing you heard all last year is they need a breath of fresh air. Mike Zimmer and, Rick Spielman, just kind of that whole leadership. So let's give them an atmospheric change here, okay? Now they're going to go with an offensive head coach, and everyone will tell you Kevin O'Connell's the real deal. Kirk Cousins loves him. Kirk Cousins was the biggest lobbyist in the Senate hearings that was the Vikings decision-making to get Kevin O'Connell in there. So now you've got an offensive head coach with Kirk Cousins up there. Ed Donatell's coming in defensively to run a 34 offense. So they get Zadarius Smith. A low-key sign they made that's going to be big is Jordan Hicks at linebacker, right? He comes over from Arizona, great leader, right? A veteran player, but a great leader. You lose Anthony Barr. That's a tough hit. Okay, but you've got some other players there. Again, you got the guys up front. You got some issues in the secondary. So grade-wise, I'm going to say that they were about a B, a B coming in, maybe even a B-. I'm going to give them a B+, just because I just think the whole atmospheric change there is going to be a positive move for them.
And then, I think we also have, when we talk about contracts now, it's like, go back to Bobby Wagner's, which is one of the last big ones that we had here. It was 5 years, $50 million with the potential to be 60 or 65 million. That kind of feels like the Vikings grade, right? It's like BB+ right now with the potential maybe for an A-, seeing on how this quarterback coach relationship works, how the defense comes together, and what they do in the draft, which we'll get into here in just a moment. All right, Kevin, back to you here with the Chicago Bears. What do you got?
I mean, this was a C to C- roster coming in, and I don't think they've done anything.
Very minimal.
I kind of feel bad for Ryan Poles. He's in a bad spot as a first-time GM, and so I got him dropping down to a C-, D+ area. They just haven't. The whole goal this offseason, buffer Justin Fields, right? You finally got this guy we think can be a franchise quarterback. Buffer him, build up the O-line, get him some receivers. They've done very minimal. They lost their best offensive lineman in James Daniels. They lost Allen Robinson. They traded Khalil Mack. You brought in Lucas Patrick. Okay, fine. You missed out on Ryan Bates, a guard that you tried to sign away from Buffalo. the wide receivers, all they really added was Byron Pringle. They signed Equanimeous St. Brown away from the Packers. And to tell you about that deal, Packers fans didn't even care.
Yeah.
I mean, these are fan bases that wouldn't share the mustard for a hot dog.
Right.
They don't even care that they signed him away. So they haven't had any money to do anything, and they haven't done what we wanted them to do, which was put pieces around Justin Fields to make him thrive. I don't see, other than Darnell Mooney, where the offense is going to move. They're going to have to be a run first, run always sort of game plan, and then ask Justin Fields to make plays at the end.
And no first round draft pick.
No, that's brutal.
Right.
Just brutal.
If you go through the names of the guys that are still free agents for them, Alex Ogletree, Danny Trevathan, Trevon Gibson, Eddie Goldman, Hakeem Hicks, Jimmy Graham, Jesse James, Jermaine Ifedi. These are guys we know. These are guys that they haven't got signed in the first or second or third wave of free agency that are going to have to wait until probably after the draft to get picked up. I mean, that just tells you the type of team they had last year. And then where are we going from there? And they don't have the money to re-sign a lot of guys. It's just kind of one of those fans in Chicago, I think, are understanding this is going to be another holding pattern sort of year. Hopefully the new staff, and you see Justin Fields develop from a progressing standpoint, going through his reads and all that sort of thing. And then you build for the next year when they have a first round pick and they have some cap relief.
Yeah, it was a tough offseason to be a Bears fan, to see so much go and very little come back in return. Let's move to the Detroit Lions, who did make some moves. Again, they weren't, huge spenders in free agency, but some kind of measured moves. Steve Wyche, what do you give them?
Yeah, look, getting DJ Shark, we know he wasn't great in Jacksonville, but do we know anything about Jacksonville's players in terms of development? Because we just don't know what they were. So I think you'd be able to pair him with Amon St. Brown. They signed back Josh Reynolds, who's a very good special teamer, a nice,
really good for him,
2 or 3 wide receiver. Yeah. So, I spoke to Brad Holmes, a GM of the Lions at the league meetings, and he was like, look, we're at the point now where everyone loves the enthusiasm. They love the way we finished. They love the way we play hard. We got to win.
Yeah.
We have to win ball games. So I think they're setting the plan in motion. We know they got the 2 first-round draft picks. They just have a ton of trade capital. Draft capital. We'll see, but I think they've improved. Just because the culture there, it's been such a negative culture for so long. I've heard this from people from like Jim Caldwell, who's like the most positive human being ever. Like, boy, you talk about a culture change. That's the 180 of all time. And Dan Campbell and that leadership group seems to have done it. So some of the moves, they've been subtle. I like the fact that they're not swinging and missing because they know the roster still has a lot of holes right now.
Yeah.
But they've got a certain type of character that seems to be developed where I think they could be better. So, the Lions, I think they're in that C category. It's still kind of a wait and see, but I think they're in that C category.
Steve, going to come right back to you with the draft prospects here for these teams in the NFC North here on our roster reset. Steve Wyche, Kevin Patra, Rhett Lewis here with you on NFL Inside Report. Let's take a quick look here at the Lions because they kind of book in the first round, right? 2 and 32. They have the highest draft pick in the NFC North. Look, for me, this is a really intriguing team to watch because I feel like that 32 spot, if their guy is there, quarterback, watch out. I think that's a real interesting spot
100%.
for one. Get the 5th-year option, develop under Jared Goff. And then number 2, they're in a great spot. Go get the second best edge rusher or the best if the Jaguars take a tackle, right? What do you think?
Yeah, look, they're going to get an edge rusher. I think right here, especially what the Jags did in free agency, they're probably going to get Aiden Hutchinson, out of Michigan. So take your pick, right? You had Penei Sewell last year. Everyone loves what Penei Sewell developed into, the way he progressed at offensive tackle. So go get the edge rusher, develop that type of tough guy defense, keep getting better up front. So I think, edge, and I love the 32 quarterback pick, and he may be able to trade back into the early part of the second round, get a little more draft equity and get your quarterback, right there. So I think that's a very, very good situation. Some of these wide receivers might be there right there as well, or a corner, if you want to do that there on that back end of the second round draft. So I think they're in a real sweet spot when it comes to the draft.
No question. Let's move then to the other team with multiple first-round draft picks here. Of course, this was courtesy of the Davante Adams trade for the Green Bay Packers, Kevin, who picked up the extra first-round pick. So now sitting at 22 and 28 overall. They have not drafted a wide receiver in the first round since Javon Walker back in 2002. So, hey, Kevin, no better time than the 20th anniversary, right? To go get another one, right?
I mean, remember Aaron Rodgers a couple of years ago talking about how he was getting drunk and waiting for them to pick a wide receiver, and then they didn't. Can you imagine if they went through two wide receivers or went to two first-round picks and they didn't take a wide receiver this year with the need? I have to believe that they've promised him, and I would hope that they've asked him which guys they've looked at, had him look at. I mean, they can't come out of the first round without a wide receiver. I just can't imagine unless they do something between now and the draft. It's just such a glaring hole. And you got a few guys in the middle of the round that I think they could plug in and play immediately. Like Steve mentioned before, there is a trust issue with Rodgers, but if he's got no choice, if this is your guy, you got to build him. Like, we invested in you, now please invest back in our guys. I can't. And then I think the other thing is maybe an offensive lineman if one slips to the mid round or replenish the trenches. I think on the defensive side of the ball would be where you go with the other pick.
Vikings at number 12. Man, it feels like defense to me, Steve.
It's a slam dunk. They got to go corner.
Right.
I mean, there's too many good guys who are going to be there. I mean, Stingley could be there. I don't think Sauce Gardner makes it down.
No,
but,
I don't either.
They've got to get a corner there. Ed Donatel is a DB specialist.
Right.
So I think you got to go corner. As they kind of get through the draft, I think you got to get into. They've got to refurbish that interior offensive line. They've been working on the tackles, and then another wide receiver. As crazy as it sounds, I mean, you can't have enough of them for the system that they run. Again, look at how many the Niners and the Rams churn through, and they develop them all. So I think at some point, mid rounds, you get a wide receiver, but early on, you've got to hit corner. You've hit the edge rushers. You've got to hit a corner who can get his hands on the ball and make plays. And Stingley's a guy like that.
Yeah, and from what I understand, DJ was talking to us. One of the big reasons that they might have re-signed a guy like Patrick Peterson was to give a support system to a guy like Derek Stingley.
Where did they both go to school there, Rhett?
Tigers, baby. DBU. They're in Baton Rouge. All right, let's finish up, Kevin, real quick. Look, no first-round pick for the Bears, as we talked about. They're on the clock at 39 in the second round. I mean, like, just a thought there. What might make the most sense or is most pressing need?
The most pressing need would be another receiver. We'll see if one of those top guys falls. I mean, there's questions about the depth. You can go one way or the other. So if one of the top guys falls, I think that's a no-brainer to grab a wide receiver at that spot. But again, I think replenishing the O-line, if there's somebody there, it would be step number 2 if there's none of your wide receivers are there.
Yeah, I think you could possibly be in the Christian Watson category there, the Sky Moore, David Bell situation there at receiver in the second round. Certainly something to think about. So that's a look at the NFC North as the rosters have been reset. When we come back, how about a look at the NFC South? And is it the Bucs division to lose once again?